Hey friends, tonight we are diving headfirst into a world so luxurious, so scandalous, and so utterly terrifying that it makes your messiest group chat look like a Sunday school picnic. We're talking about the Ottoman Harem. But this isn't the glittery, fanfiction version you've seen in the movies. Oh no, this is the real deal, the unglam, the behind-the-scenes documentary where the lighting is bad and everyone's crying. You're about to be snatched from your home, rebranded, and thrown into the most high-stakes season of a reality show that ever existed, where the prize is survival and the penalty is, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You probably won't survive this, by the way, especially if you're allergic to judgment, backstabbing, or the lingering smell of goat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Bonus points if you're watching this while pretending to work. We've all been there. Now grab snacks, mute your mom, and let's get weird together. The first thing you notice isn't the fear, which is weird, because you should be terrified. No, the first thing you notice is the smell. It's a thick, unholy cocktail of stale sweat, salt water, damp wool, and something vaguely like old cheese that's given up on life. You're huddled in the belly of a ship, a place that was definitely not designed for human passengers, not even the unwilling kind. The rough-sawn planks dig into your back, and with every lurch of the waves, your stomach tries to exit your body through your throat. You and about 20 other girls are packed in here like a bad batch of pickles. None of you speaking the same language, all of you sharing the same wide-eyed. What fresh hell is this expression? Yesterday you were picking olives, or mending a fishing net, or gossiping with your sister. Today you're inventory. This is the worst unboxing video ever. Your captors are not the dashing pirates of legend. There are no eye patches, no charmingly roguish smiles. These are just tired, grumpy men with bad teeth and worse hygiene, running a business. They're glorified, homicidal delivery drivers, and you're the problematic package. They shove a wooden bowl of something gray and mushy at you once a day, and a cup of brackish water that tastes like it was scooped from a puddle. You learn quickly. You learn to eat the mush. You learn to ignore the weeping girl next to you, because her grief is a language you understand too well, and it's contagious. You know that staring at the sliver of sky through the grate in the ceiling is a good way to get a boot in your side. So you stare at your knees instead. This is the start of your journey to the big leagues, the Imperial Harem in Constantinople. This is how most of the girls got there. They weren't Ottoman subjects volunteering for a life of luxury. They were snatched. Most were captured in raids by pirates, like your current, unfortunate travel companions, or taken as spoils of war. You might be from a village in the Caucasus, famous for its beautiful women, or from a windswept steppe in modern-day Ukraine, or even a coastal town in Italy. Your origin story is now irrelevant. You're being forcibly relocated and rebranded. In fact, one of the pirates, the one who seems to be in charge of the paperwork, gestures at you and barks a name. It's not your name. It's short, simple, and probably the name of his favorite goat. This is a weirdly familiar and cruel little tidbit of the trade. Giving captives new, generic names on the spot, scrubbing away your identity before you've even reached your destination. It's efficient in a soulless corporate takeover sort of way. You don't really know where you're going. The older girls, the ones who've seen this before, whisper the word Stamboul, with a mix of terror and awe. The capital, the center of the world, the palace of the Sultan. You've heard stories, of course, fairy tales about a life of impossible riches, silk pillows and candied fruits. But as you sit here, with splinters in your backside and your stomach churning, those stories feel like a cruel joke. The reality is the stinking, rolling darkness. The fact is the dead-eyed stare of the girl across from you, who hasn't moved in a day. You try to remember your mother's face, and it's already blurring, like an old watercolor left out in the rain. Historians still argue whether the initial market evaluation of captives was a complex process considering things like health, apparent resilience, and potential for cultural integration, or if it was just a bunch of dudes squinting and going, yeah, she looks like she won't die on the boat. Good enough. Honestly, when you're the one being squinted at, the academic nuance feels aggressively beside the point. You know, A man with a beard that contains remnants of his last 3 meals looked you up and down, poked your shoulder like you were a melon at the market, and nodded. Sold. After what feels like an eternity of bobbing on the ocean, the air changes. It's still salty, but now it's laced with the smell of wood smoke, roasting meat, and a million people. The ship stops rolling. Sunlight, real, blinding sunlight, streams in as the hatch is thrown open. You're herded onto the deck, blinking like a confused owl. And then you see it. Constantinople. It's impossible. Domes and minarets stab the sky. A skyline so grand and alien it feels like a fever dream. The sheer scale of it is an insult. How can a world that contains such beauty also contain the stinking hold of that ship? It's a city of gold and light, and you're being led through its back alleys in chains. Your bare feet sticking to flagstones slick with fish guts and donkey droppings. You are not a tourist. You are not a pilgrim. You are a product fresh off the boat, heading for the most exclusive, most dangerous, and most infamous sorority in the entire world. And you haven't even had a proper shower yet. That, thankfully, is about to change, but not in the relaxing, spa-day way you might hope for. You're marched through the city, a human centipede of misery, until you stand before a gate so enormous it seems to have been built for giants. This is it, Topkapı Palace. For almost 400 years, this wasn't just the Sultan's house. It was the entire empire's HR department, Pentagon, and White House all rolled into one sprawling, seaside complex. It's less a palace and more a small, heavily fortified city built on a hill overlooking the water. From here, the Sultan could literally watch the world's commerce sail past his window. No pressure. You're shuffled through the first gate, the Imperial Gate, into a massive courtyard teeming with life. It's loud. Soldiers, officials, petitioners, and merchants scurry about their business. It smells of horses and anxiety. But then you're led toward a second gate, the Gate of Salutation, and the vibe shifts. The noise fades. The air gets heavier. 2 imposing, conical towers flank the gate, and the guards here don't look bored. They look like they could kill you with a sharp glance. Only the Sultan on his horse could pass through this gate. Everyone else, from the Grand Vizier down, had to dismount. You, of course, were never meant to begin with. You trudge through on foot, feeling about as significant as a piece of gravel. Now you're in the second court, and this is where things get weirdly beautiful and deeply intimidating. A sinister, manicured perfection replaces the chaos of the outer court. Cypress trees stand like silent green sentinels. The gardens are immaculate, riots of tulips and roses. But strutting around like they own the place are peacocks. Dozens of them. They fan their absurdly gorgeous tails and let out blood-curdling screams that sound like a cat being murdered. This is a known quirky tidbit about the palace grounds. It was a full-blown menagerie. Sultans collected exotic animals like they were Pokemon. So alongside the peacocks, you might see gazelles nibbling at the rose bushes or hear the chatter of unseen monkeys. Your first challenge as a potential resident? Navigating the pristine marble walkways without stepping in a fresh, iridescent smear of peacock droppings. It's the universe's way of saying, this place is beautiful, but it will still find a way to humiliate you. Everyone you see is dressed in elaborate, clean clothes. Officials in flowing kaftans glide past, their faces impassive masks. They don't look at you so much as through you. You're grubby. Travel-stained tunic and bare feet might as well be a sign that says, I am human garbage. The collective side eye is so powerful you feel your soul shrink a little. Finally, your miserable parade is guided to a smaller, unassuming door, set into the wall of the court. It's guarded by men unlike any you've ever seen. They are tall and imposing, with smooth, eerily calm faces. These are the Chief Black Eunuch's subordinates, the gatekeepers of your new world. Your merchant captor shoves you forward, has a brief, muttered conversation with one of the guards, and just like that, you are handed over. It's a transaction. He gets a bag of coins. The harem gets you. You're pushed inside, and the door closes behind you with a heavy, final thud. You are now in the courtyard of the eunuchs, the formal entrance to the imperial harem. And the girl boss gauntlet begins. The first order of business is decontamination. You and the other new arrivals are stripped of your rags. There's no modesty here. You stand, naked and shivering, on cold stone tiles while older women circle you like vultures evaluating a carcass. They grab you not gently and dunk you into baths of hot water. They scrub you raw with coarse cloths and harsh soap that smells vaguely of lye. It's less of a cleansing and more of an exorcism of your past life. They wash the grime of the road, the stench of the ship, the very memory of your home right off your skin. Then comes the inspection. A woman who carries herself with the authority of a drill sergeant and a man who is clearly a physician look you over. Every inch of you. They check your teeth, your eyes, and the soles of your feet. They're looking for any sign of illness, any imperfection, any scar that might tell a story they don't want to read. Historians still argue whether this initial medical examination was a genuine effort to maintain the health of the palace population, or more like a jeweler inspecting a gemstone for flaws before purchase. As you're standing there, getting poked and prodded like a prize pig at a county fair, the scholarly debate feels profoundly irrelevant. Feels like you're being graded, and you don't even know the subject. After the ordeal, you're given new clothes, not silk and jewels. Not yet. You're handed a simple, scratchy linen shift. It's a uniform. You are now an asami, a novice. You are a trainee and intern. You've officially hit rock bottom on the harem's corporate ladder. You're led through a maze of corridors, upstairs, past latticed windows that let in stripes of light, but show you nothing of the outside world. The air is thick with the scent of flowers, perfume, and cooking spices, a dizzying perfume designed to mask the quiet desperation. You're finally deposited into a crowded dormitory with dozens of other girls, all of them wearing the same uniform, all of them with the same look of bewildered exhaustion. You've been cleaned, catalogued, and clothed. You've been successfully processed. Welcome to the machine. You made it inside. Now the absolute nightmare begins. The dormitory is a loud, overwhelming sea of faces. You're shown to a thin mattress on the floor, which will be your entire personal space in a room you share with 50 other girls. There is no privacy. There are no secrets. The girl on the mattress to your right is crying silently into her pillow. The group in the corner is whispering in a language that sounds like hissing. The air hums with a constant, low-grade tension, like the moments before a thunderstorm. You've been dropped into the most brutal sorority rush in history, and you don't even know the Greek letters. This is the harem's corporate ladder, and you, my friend, are a first-day intern, fetching coffee for people who might literally kill you. You learn the ranks faster than you know anyone's name, because your survival depends on it. At the very bottom, there's you, the asami, the novice. Your job is to be invisible, to do the scut work, and not to mess up. You'll be scrubbing floors, carrying laundry, and serving the higher-ranking women. You're a ghost in a linen shift. Make a mistake. Spill a drink on the wrong person, speak out of turn, and you'll be punished. Punishments range from a vicious tongue lashing to a beating with a wooden rod. Best case scenario, you get yelled at. Worst case, you disappear. People notice, but no one asks where you went. It's better not to know. If you survive the intern phase and show some promise, maybe you're quick or pretty, or you manage not to poison a senior member accidentally, you get promoted. You become a kuriai. This is a general servant, but with slightly better clothes and slightly less soul-crushing labor. You're still serving, but now you're serving more critical people. You might be assigned to a specific high-ranking woman, a USTA, who is essentially a middle manager. This is your first chance to play the game. Impress your USTA, become her favorite, and she might recommend you for further training. This is where the mainstream historical fact kicks in. The harem was, at its core, a brutally efficient meritocracy. A girl who arrived as a terrified, illiterate enslaved person could, with the right combination of intelligence, beauty, and ruthless ambition, rise to become one of the most powerful people in the empire. It was the deadliest pull-yourself-up-by-your-bootstraps story imaginable. From kuriai, you might become a gadikli, a privileged one. Now we're talking. You've caught the eye of someone important. Maybe the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, or perhaps even the big boss himself, the Sultan. As a gadikli, you have your own room, or at least share with only one or two other girls. You get better clothes, better food, and special training. You're no longer just a servant. You are now officially in the running. You are a potential concubine. The other girls, the ones still scrubbing floors, now look at you with a new kind of envy, one that's sharpened with resentment. Your former friends might stop talking to you. The whispers follow you down the hallways. She thinks she's special. Wait till she gets what's coming to her. The currency in this place isn't money. It's a favor. It's proximity to power. And the ultimate power, the sun around which this entire universe orbits, is the Sultan. If you become one of his favorites, you become an Iqbal, a fortunate one. You have your own apartments, your own servants, some of whom might be the identical girls you used to scrub floors with, awkward, and a hefty daily allowance. But the highest rank, the one every woman here is secretly, desperately fighting for, is Caden. A Caden is a wife, one of the 4 official consorts the Sultan was allowed to have. To reach this status, you usually had to bear him a child, preferably a son. And if your son eventually became the Sultan, you would hit the jackpot. You would become the Valide Sultan, the Queen Mother, the undisputed ruler of the harem, and a political powerhouse from slave to CEO. It's the ultimate glow-up. But here's the quirky tidbit, the dark joke underpinning this whole corporate structure. Your job title was directly tied to your romantic and reproductive life. Imagine your performance review at work being like, well, Brenda, your spreadsheets are excellent, but you haven't slept with the CEO and produced a male heir this quarter, so we're demoting you back to the mailroom. It's wild. Your entire career path, your safety, your very life, depends on catching the eye of one man and the subsequent success of your uterus. This created a frenzied atmosphere of competition. Friendships were temporary alliances at best. The girl you shared your fears with one night might be the one who accidentally trips you down a flight of stairs the next if she thinks you're getting too close to the Sultan. Historians still argue whether the harem was a prison or a golden cage, a place of female subjugation or a unique avenue for female power in a patriarchal world. Honestly, standing in the middle of it, you'd probably say, can it be both? Yes, you have a chance to gain immense influence, but you're also fundamentally property. You can't leave, ever. Even if you never catch the Sultan's eye, you don't get to pack up and go home. You're here for life. Your world has shrunk to these gilded walls, these perfumed corridors, and the faces of the other women who are both your colleagues and your competition. You learn to smile when you want to scream. You learn to watch, to listen, to calculate. You know that in the H-Corp, there are no friends, only temporary allies and permanent threats. And at the top of this whole terrifying pyramid sits one woman you do not want to cross. The ultimate momager, the CEO, the Valide Sultan. And you're about to meet her. You don't just meet the Valide Sultan. You are brought into her presence like a humble offering to a demanding deity. The air in her chambers is different. It's warmer, thicker, scented with expensive ambergris and a faint, intimidating smell of absolute authority, while the rest of the harem hums with the nervous energy of 1,000 anxious women. Her quarters are an oasis of terrifying calm. Sunlight, filtered through jewel-toned stained glass, paints patterns on the priceless silk carpets. Everything gleams. The pearl inlays on the furniture, the gold threads in the tapestries, the cold glint in her eyes. This is the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, and she is the undisputed CEO of this entire, chaotic enterprise. She's probably in her 40s or 50s, but she carries herself with the ageless poise of a marble statue. She doesn't look at you, not at first. She's reclining on a mountain of velvet cushions, perhaps idly stroking a fluffy Angora cat, the kind that looks cute but would definitely claw your eyes out for no reason. This woman was once exactly like you. An enslaved person, a novice, terrified and alone. She clawed her way up the corporate ladder, survived the pregnancy Hunger Games, and successfully maneuvered her son onto the throne. She has seen it all, done it all, and probably ordered the deaths of people for less than spilling her sherbet. She is a master of the game because she designed half the rules. Her official title, Valide Sultan, literally means Mother of the Sultan, but her unofficial title is the person you should fear more than God. Her power is immense and very real. This is the mainstream fact that often gets lost in the sexy slave girl fantasies. The Valide Sultan was arguably the second most powerful person in the Ottoman Empire. She commanded a massive personal income, drawn from royal estates, taxes, and gifts from officials who knew which side their bread was buttered on. She was a major political player, advising her son, the Sultan, on everything from military campaigns to the appointment of the Grand Vizier. She was the one constant in his life, the one person he was supposed to trust implicitly. She managed a vast network of spies both inside and outside the palace walls, meaning she knew every secret, every illicit whisper, every ambitious plot before it even fully formed in someone's mind. She is the living, breathing embodiment of, I have eyes and ears everywhere. You and a line of other novices stand before her, heads bowed, not daring to make eye contact. Your sandals, a recent upgrade from bare feet, feel sticky on the polished marble floor. Maybe it's sweat. Perhaps it's residual goat pee from a pet that wandered through earlier. You wouldn't be surprised. The woman in charge of you, a stern-faced USTA, announces your names. Your new, simplified, palace-approved names. The Valide Sultan finally lifts her head, and her gaze sweeps over you. It's not a warm, motherly look. It's an appraisal. It's the look of a master gardener inspecting new seedlings, deciding which ones are worth watering and which ones will be left to wither. You feel your blood turn to ice water. This is the woman who decides your entire future. She decides if you get promoted from scrubbing floors to learning the lute. She decides whether you're pretty enough, intelligent enough, or docile enough to be presented to her son. She decides your snack allowance. And, if you become a problem, she decides if you get quietly sewn into a leather sack and dropped into the Bosphorus. This leads us to a fascinating, fringe tidbit about her power, her signature. Because many of the Valide Sultans were, like you, brought to the harem as non-Turkish enslaved people, they were often illiterate, at least at first. Even after learning to speak courtly Ottoman Turkish, many never fully mastered the written Arabic script. So how does a powerful, illiterate woman sign binding legal documents and royal decrees? With an elaborate, personalized stamp called a tugra. But some Valide Sultans had an even more personal method, a stylized thumbprint, or a unique, drawn symbol that was legally recognized as her signature. Imagine the Grand Vizier, the most powerful man after the Sultan, waiting nervously for a woman who can't read to literally give her stamp of approval, or a fancy thumbprint, to a state document declaring war. It's a wild image, and a perfect example of how power in the harem was a strange, hybrid beast. You're trying very hard to be a good seedling. You stand perfectly still. You breathe as quietly as possible. You project an aura of, I am harmless, and have the IQ of a decorative houseplant. Because here's the thing historians still debate. Was the Valide Sultan's primary role to protect her son from the dangers of the court, or was it to preserve her own power through her son, ruthlessly eliminating any threat to her status? Was she a protective mother bear or a Machiavellian queen bee? The answer, most likely, is a terrifying yes. Her son's life was her life's work and her meal ticket. Anyone or anything that threatened him, a rival brother, an ambitious vizier, a pretty new concubine who might gain too much influence, was a threat to her. And she dealt with threats efficiently. She dismisses you all with a flick of her wrist. The audience is over. You're herded back out, your heart pounding a drum solo against your ribs. You didn't get singled out for punishment, which is a victory, but you also didn't get singled out for favor. You're still just one of 100 anonymous faces. As you scurry back to the dormitories, you catch a glimpse of another figure in the hallway, a man dressed in opulent silks, conversing quietly with the Valide Sultan's chief steward. He is tall, powerful, and radiates an aura of authority that rivals the Valide's own. And he is the one person in this palace who has more access, more secrets, and arguably more day-to-day control over your life than anyone. The Chief Black Eunuch, the gatekeeper, and your fate rests just as much in his hands as it does in hers. If the Valide Sultan is the harem's terrifying CEO, the Chief Black Eunuch is its COO, the Chief Operating Officer. He's the one who actually makes the trains run on time, or in this case, makes sure the dozens of daily microdramas in the harem don't spill over and assassinate the Sultan. You see him gliding through the corridors of the harem, a silent, imposing figure draped in silks and authority. His official title is the Kisler Aga, the Aga of the girls. And it's a hilarious, terrifying understatement. He's not just in charge of the girls. He's the master of their universe, the warden of the gilded cage, and one of the most powerful men in the entire Ottoman Empire. His presence is a paradox. In a world defined by the Sultan's hypermasculinity and the cloistered femininity of the harem, the eunuchs are a third gender. They are men, but they are not. They are enslaved, yet masters. The Chief Black Eunuch, in particular, was a figure of immense influence. This is your mainstream fact. He was third in the entire state protocol, standing only behind the Grand Vizier and the chief religious dignitary. He had the rank of a vizier, commanded his own regiment of palace guards, and had the Sultan's ear. He was the vital link between the secluded world of the harem and the male-dominated world of imperial politics. The Sultan trusted him because, unable to father children of his own, he could never start a rival dynasty. He had no skin in the succession game, which made him the perfect impartial enforcer. Or so the theory went. You learn to fear his footsteps, the soft rustle of his kaftan. He is the one who oversees the procurement of new girls like you. He managed the harem's finances, its promotions and demotions, its punishments. When the Valide Sultan decides you're a problem, he's the one who carries out the sentence. His network of spies within the harem is second only to hers. He knows who is secretly friends with whom, who stole whose perfume, and who is plotting to poison whose morning coffee. Nothing happens in these labyrinthine halls without him knowing about it. His face is a smooth, unreadable mask, his eyes missing the youthful fire you see in the palace guards. He's seen too much. He knows where all the bodies are buried, sometimes literally. The eunuchs who guarded the harem were primarily sourced from Africa, particularly from modern-day Sudan and Ethiopia, which is why they were known as the Black Eunuchs. Their journey to the palace was often just as traumatic as yours. Captured as boys, they endured a brutal, usually fatal castration procedure and were then sold into the slave markets of Cairo or Alexandria before being brought to Constantinople. This practice is a profoundly uncomfortable part of the harem's history, but it's crucial to understanding its power structure. There were also white eunuchs, typically sourced from the Caucasus or the Balkans, who guarded the outer areas of the palace where the male officials worked. But they were never allowed into the inner sanctum of the harem. The Kisler Aga and his cadre of black eunuchs were the sole male presence, besides the Sultan and his young sons, allowed to live and work alongside the women. And here's a quirky, fringe tidbit that highlights the strangeness of his position. The Chief Black Eunuch was also in charge of the administration of the two holy cities, Mecca and Medina. Yes, you read that right. The man who managed the Sultan's concubines was also responsible for the vast charitable foundations and endowments that supported the holiest sites in Islam. He controlled immense wealth and religious patronage. Imagine the Pope's chief of staff also being in charge of managing a Las Vegas casino. It's that level of bizarre, contradictory job description. This gave him incredible prestige and power throughout the Muslim world. A letter from the Kisler Aga carried almost as much weight as one from the Sultan himself. You see him confer with the Valide Sultan in hushed tones. They are the harem's power couple, a terrifying alliance of strategy and enforcement. She sets the policy, he implements it. They might smile at each other, but you can feel the tension, the constant, subtle jockeying for influence over the Sultan. Whose advice will he take today? Hers or his? Their relationship is the central political axis on which the harem, and often the empire, turns. Historians still argue whether the Chief Black Eunuchs were loyal servants of the throne or self-interested power brokers who often pursued their own agendas, manipulating sultans and fomenting palace coups. Were they selfless guardians of the dynasty, or were they just as ambitious and corrupt as any other politician, simply playing the game with the hand they were dealt? The evidence points to, you guessed it, both. Some were famously loyal and pious. Others were notorious for their greed and political scheming, accumulating vast personal fortunes and engineering the rise and fall of grand viziers. They were complex, powerful men trapped in a system that both elevated and mutilated them. As a lowly Asami, you are beneath his notice. But you watch him. You learn his routines. You learn which of his subordinate eunuchs are cruel and which are simply tired. You know that a quiet word from one of them can ruin your life or save it. You are all inmates in this beautiful prison. But he is the warden. He holds the keys. And those keys don't just lock the doors to the outside world. They lock the doors to the classrooms, the music rooms, and the dance halls. Because your life as a floor scrubber is about to end. Your education is about to begin. And if you thought your high school was tough, you are in for a rude and possibly fatal awakening. Your days of endlessly scrubbing floors with sand and lemon water are numbered. One morning, instead of being handed a bucket, you're herded with a group of other promising novices into a different wing of the harem. The air here smells less like cleaning fluids and more like beeswax and books. This is school. But it's not the kind of school you've ever imagined. There's no recess. The final exams can be lethal. Welcome to the harem's killer curriculum, a finishing school designed to turn unrefined slave girls into women sophisticated enough to entertain and potentially manipulate the most powerful man in the world. Your new life is a dizzying, exhausting whirlwind of lessons. The schedule is rigid and relentless. You wake before dawn for prayers, followed by a quick breakfast of bread, cheese, and olives. Then the classes begin. Your first lesson is Turkish. Not the slang-filled Turkish of the marketplace, but the high-flown, poetic, ridiculously complex Ottoman Turkish of the court. Your tutor is a stern-faced Kalfa, a senior woman who has been in the harem for decades and has the patience of a wasp in a jar. She drills you on verb conjugations and proper forms of address. You learn how to say Your Majesty in 12 different ways, each one appropriate for a different, terrifyingly specific social context. Using the wrong one could get you a smack with a ruler or, worse, labeled as a clumsy oaf, killing your career before it even starts. After language lessons, you're shuffled off to learn to read and write. This was a key part of the harem education and a significant historical fact. While most women in the empire, and indeed most of Europe at the time, were illiterate, the women of the Sultan's harem were expected to be cultured. You learn to read the Quran, but you also read the great poets of Persian and Turkish literature. You spend hours hunched over a low desk, your fingers cramping as you try to master the elegant, flowing strokes of Arabic script. Your handwriting is judged as harshly as your grammar. It's not just about literacy, it's about aesthetics. Everything you do must be beautiful, graceful, and pleasing to the eye. Then comes the real gauntlet, the artistic portion of your education. You're taught music. You might be handed a lute, a harp, or a timbre, a long-necked stringed instrument with a sound that's both beautiful and mournful. Your fingers, raw from scrubbing floors, are now expected to dance delicately over strings. You're taught to sing the complex, microtonal melodies of classical Ottoman music. If you're clumsy, if you're tone-deaf, you are ridiculed. Failure is not an option. You practice until your fingers bleed and your voice is hoarse. Next up, dance. A lithe, impossibly graceful dance master teaches you how to move your body with fluidity and control. It's not just about shaking your hips. It's about storytelling through movement, about mastering the art of the subtle gesture, the meaningful glance. You feel awkward and gangly. Your limbs won't cooperate. You trip over your own feet while the girl next to you, a Circassian with joints that seem to be made of water, moves like a willow in the wind. Jealousy is a bitter taste in your mouth. You practice in the dorm at night, long after everyone else is asleep, trying to force your body to be as elegant as your teachers demand. But the most important class isn't on the official schedule. It's the one you learn between the lines, in the whispers in the hallways, in the sharp glances exchanged over the dinner table. You are learning the art of intrigue. You're being trained in conversation, in the art of being witty but not too bright, charming but not overtly ambitious. You learn to gossip strategically, to gather information without seeming to ask questions, and to deploy a well-timed compliment like a weapon. You know who is friends with whom, who owes whom a favor, and who hates whom with a fiery passion. This is the real curriculum, the poetry and the music. That's just the cover story. The real skill you're acquiring is social survival. Here's the quirky, fringe tidbit. Alongside high art, you were also taught efficient skills. Specifically, you learned embroidery and needlework of the highest possible quality. This wasn't just a quaint hobby. The embroidered handkerchiefs, sashes, and other textiles produced by the women of the harem were a form of currency. A beautifully embroidered handkerchief, accidentally dropped in the path of the sultan, could be a way of getting noticed. It was a physical manifestation of your skill, your patience, and your taste. It was your business card. A wonky stitch could be a sign of a clumsy, impatient nature. A perfect, intricate pattern that showed you were a woman of refinement and discipline. Your embroidery was your resume. Historians still argue whether this intensive education was a tool of empowerment, giving these slave women a level of culture and sophistication unavailable to their contemporaries, or if it was simply the most elaborate job training program in history for a role that was fundamentally about servitude. Was it about cultivating the women's minds? Or was it just about making them more pleasing ornaments for the sultan? As you sit there, your brain buzzing with Turkish verb tenses and your back aching from dance practice, you'd probably argue it's a bit of both. You feel more intelligent, more polished, more capable than you ever have before. But you also know, with a chilling certainty, that all of this is for one purpose, and one purpose only, to make you worthy of a single man's attention. You're no longer an Asami. You've graduated. You're a Gadikli now, a privileged one. You have nicer clothes, more personal space, and the crushing weight of expectation on your shoulders. You've been trained, polished, and perfected. You are a work of art, created by a committee of harsh critics. And now you're ready to be displayed. The final exam is coming. The night you might be chosen, and you have a horrifying feeling that all the poetry in the world isn't going to prepare you for it. The summons comes without warning. One evening, as you're practicing a melody on the lute, trying to get the mournful notes just right, an USTA enters your room. She doesn't say a word. She gives you a look. The look, it's a mixture of congratulations and pity. It's your turn. Your stomach drops through the floor and takes up residence somewhere near your ankles. All that training, all those lessons in poetry, dance, and how to look fetching while embroidering a handkerchief, it was all for this. This is the final. It's the night of the Kumajesisai, the Thursday night gathering, a terrifying cross between a royal ball, a high-stakes job interview, and a trip to the vet. You're whisked away to the baths. Again. But this time is different. It's not the rough, humiliating scrub down of your arrival. This is a meticulous, ritualistic preparation. You're bathed in scented water, your skin is slathered with fragrant oils, and your hair is combed and perfumed until it shines. You're being prepared like a prize-winning rose for the big flower show. Your every flaw is buffed, plucked, and perfumed into submission. The women attending you are a flurry of silent, efficient activity. No one is cracking jokes. The mood is tense, reverent. It feels less like a beauty treatment and more like the preparations for a very fancy, very stressful sacrifice. You're dressed in an outfit that costs more than your entire village made in a year. The fabrics are impossibly soft, silk, velvet, gossamer thin gauze threaded with gold. You're draped in jewels that are heavy and cold against your warm skin. A delicate, sheer veil is placed over your face, designed not to hide you, but to make you more alluring. As you look at your reflection in a polished silver mirror, you barely recognize the person staring back. The girl from the fishing village is gone, buried under layers of silk and anxiety. In her place is a stranger, a beautiful, terrified doll. You feel like you're in costume for a play you never auditioned for. Finally, you and a handful of other chosen girls, all looking equally stunning and sick with nerves, are led to the imperial hall. This is the heart of the harem, a vast, opulent chamber where the sultan receives his family and, on nights like this, his potential conquests. The room is a sensory overload. The air is thick with incense. The light from 100 candles glints off the gold leaf on the walls and the intricate patterns of the Iznik tiles. The Valide Sultan is there, enthroned on a dais, watching everything with her sharp, appraising eyes. The Chief Black Eunuch stands near the door, a silent, imposing shadow. Musicians play softly in the corner, the same melodies you've been practicing until your fingers bled. It's all so beautiful, it makes you want to throw up. The Sultan arrives. The music stops. Everyone bows. You don't dare look up, but you can feel his presence suck all the air out of the room. This is the man your entire world has been reconfigured to please. He might be young and handsome, old and grizzled, brilliant and witty, or dull as a rock. It doesn't matter. He is the Sultan. He is your sun, your moon, and your potential meal ticket to survival. You are a planet, and your only job is to get caught in his orbit. The evening begins. It's a performance. There's music, there's dance. Some of the girls, the ones with particular talents, are called upon to perform. One girl sings a lament so heartbreaking it silences the room. Another dance is so mesmerizing that you forget to be jealous. You pray you're not called on. You pray to be a wallflower. You pray to be invisible. The mainstream historical fact is that this wasn't a crude lineup. It was a sophisticated social event. The Sultan would observe the girls, listen to them converse, judge their grace, their wit, their charm. It was as much about intellectual and artistic connection as it was about physical attraction. At least that was the theory. For you, standing there with your heart hammering against your ribs, it feels exactly like a crude lineup. And now for the quirky and frankly bizarre tidbit about this whole process. The handkerchief. The popular story, repeated in countless Orientalist paintings and novels, is that the Sultan would stroll among the women and drop a handkerchief at the feet of the one he'd chosen. It's a dramatic, romantic image. It's also probably not true. Most serious historians think this was a myth, a bit of European fan fiction about the exotic East. The real process was likely far more discreet and bureaucratic. The Sultan would mention to the Chief Black Eunuch or the Valide Sultan which girl had caught his eye. The message would then be relayed. No dramatic handkerchief drop. Just a quiet, terrifying, "The boss wants to see you in his office." Historians still debate the extent of the women's agency in this moment. Could a woman refuse the Sultan? Technically, no. He was the absolute monarch, and you were his slave. Refusal was unthinkable. But could she subtly sabotage her chances? Could she sing off-key on purpose? Seems clumsy? Feign a headache? Maybe. But it was a perilous gambit. If you were caught trying to fail the audition, you'd be seen as defiant and insubordinate, which was a one-way ticket to a punishment you didn't want. It was a choice between a terrifying opportunity and an inevitable, unpleasant fate. Tonight, he notices you. You don't know how or why. Maybe it was the way the candlelight caught the jewels in your hair. Perhaps you were standing in his line of sight when his gaze wandered. He says something quietly to the Kisler Aga, his eyes lingering on you for a fraction of a second too long. And that's it. The die is cast. The eunuch's gaze finds you, and he gives a nearly imperceptible nod. A jolt goes through you, hot and cold at the same time. You've been chosen. The other girls subtly shift away from you, a silent excommunication. You are now in a different category. Later, you're led down a specific, gilded corridor known as the Golden Road. It's the path that connects the harem to the Sultan's private chambers. It's not very long, but it feels like the longest walk of your life. Every step echoes. You're about to spend the night with the most powerful man in the world. If he likes you, your life will change forever. You'll become an Iqbal, a favorite. If he doesn't, you'll be quietly sent back to the ranks, your one shot wasted, an object of pity and scorn. But there's a third possibility, one that's even more terrifying and more desirable than just being liked and getting pregnant. And that's when the real game begins, the pregnancy Hunger Games. You survived the night on the Golden Road. The Sultan was pleased. Maybe he was charmed by your halting poetry, or perhaps he just liked that you didn't trip over the furniture. The reason is irrelevant. The result is everything. When you walk back into the harem quarters the next morning, everything is different, the air parts around you. The women who were your peers yesterday now bow their heads. The ustas who used to scold you now bring you sweetened milk and honeyed dates. You have been promoted. You are an Iqbal, a fortunate one. You're moved into a private apartment, attended by your own servants, girls who were just last week your roommates. The awkwardness is a physical presence in the room. Life is suitable for a minute. The food is exquisite. The clothes are made of silk, and you no longer have to scrub anything. Your only job is to be beautiful, charming, and available for the Sultan. But you quickly realize that being a favorite is like standing in the middle of a battlefield during a truce. The peace is temporary. You are a target. Every other woman in the harem, from the lowest novice to the established cadens, sees you as a threat. The Valide Sultan watches you with an unnerving, clinical interest. You are a new variable in her carefully constructed equation, and she's not sure if you're an asset or a liability yet. Then, one morning, you miss your monthly cycle. Your whole world screeches to a halt. A quiet visit from the harem's chief midwife confirms it. You are pregnant. This is it. This is the jackpot. This is the moment you've been trained for, the biological lottery you were born to win. The news spreads through the harem like wildfire. You are immediately elevated to a new status. You are no longer just a favorite. You are a potential mother of a prince. You are now a caden, a full-fledged consort. This is the primary historical path to becoming one of the Sultan's official wives. Bearing a child, especially a son, was the ultimate promotion. Your life becomes a cocoon of obsessive care. You are given the best food, the softest pillows. You are attended by a small army of servants who watch your every move. You are not to be stressed. You are not to be startled. You are a precious vessel, and your cargo is the future of the dynasty. But this cocoon is not safe. It's the starting line of a new, more dangerous race. The Pregnancy Hunger Games. You are now in direct competition with every other pregnant woman in the harem, and with every woman who has already borne a son. The other cadens are your rivals. They smile at you, congratulate you, and bring you little gifts. But their eyes are cold. They are calculating. Their son's positions, their own status, are now threatened by the child in your womb. If you have a son, he will be a potential rival to their sons for the throne. And in the Ottoman Empire, sibling rivalry isn't settled with a wrestling match in the backyard. It's settled with a silk bowstring. Your pregnancy is a declaration of war. The paranoia sets in. You can't trust the food. Was this pomegranate juice sweetened with honey or with something else? You eye your servants with suspicion. Is she loyal to you, or is she a spy for another caden? You hear whispers and you're sure they're about you. A slipped rug, a sudden stumble on the stairs. Is it an accident or an attempt on your life and the life of your unborn child? This isn't just you being crazy. This stuff happened. The history of the harem is littered with stories of accidental miscarriages and mysterious illnesses that befell pregnant concubines. It was a silent, brutal battle fought with poison, accidents, and black magic. This brings us to a weird, dark, fringe tidbit about harem rivalries: the use of curses and witchcraft. While the palace was the center of a great Islamic empire, it was also steeped in superstition. Women would hire sorcerers from outside the palace walls, paying them exorbitant sums to cast spells on their rivals. They would obtain cursed amulets, powders to be secretly sprinkled on a rival's food, or enchanted objects to be hidden in a rival's room. They'd try to cause a miscarriage, to make a rival fall out of favor, or even to cause her death. Finding a strange bundle of hair and nails tied with black thread under your pillow wasn't just creepy. It was a credible threat. The chief eunuch spent a good portion of his time trying to stamp out the rampant use of black magic, but it was a battle he could never fully win. Historians still argue about the extent of this violence. Was the harem a constant snake pit of murderous plots, as popular imagination suggests, or were these incidents rare, sensational exceptions? Did the women form alliances and support networks, or was it truly every woman for herself? The truth is likely somewhere in the murky middle. There were certainly friendships and partnerships, often based on shared origins or mutual benefit. But when the ultimate prize, your son's life and his path to the throne, was on the line, those alliances could shatter in an instant. The system was explicitly designed to pit the women against each other. You give birth. It's a boy, prince, a Satsad. The palace celebrates. Cannons are fired. Gifts are distributed to people experiencing poverty. You have done it. You have won the lottery. You hold your son in your arms, this tiny, perfect creature, and you feel a wave of love so fierce it terrifies you. You look at his face and you don't just see your child. You see a future sultan, and you see a target. Your victory in the pregnancy Hunger Games is complete, but you've just been entered into a new, even deadlier tournament, because now you have to keep him alive. And to do that, you have to understand the paranoid, gilded, and perilous world his father, the Sultan, inhabits. A world where brothers are not playmates. They are threats. You've produced a prince. Congratulations, you've officially leveled up from potential victim to mother of a potential victim. To understand the danger your tiny son is now in, you have to understand the man you share a bed with, the Sultan. From the outside, his life looks like the ultimate fantasy. He's the absolute ruler of a vast, wealthy empire, a man whose every whim is law. He lives in unparalleled luxury, surrounded by beauty, and wields the power of life and death. He is the shadow of God on earth. But from the inside, his life is a paranoid tightrope walk over a bubbling pit of ambition, betrayal, and poisoned coffee. You see it in the little things. You see it in the way he never eats a dish until a royal taster has tried it first. You see it in the constant, silent presence of the Bastanchi, the elite imperial guards who are both his protectors and his executioners. They follow him everywhere, their hands always resting on the hilts of their swords. His world is a gilded cage, just like yours, but his is lined with the constant, humming fear of assassination. This is a core historical fact of the Sultanate. Being the Sultan was the most dangerous job in the empire. Of the first 31 Ottoman sultans, nearly a third were deposed, and a significant number of those were subsequently murdered. It wasn't a job with a good retirement plan. His biggest threat isn't a foreign army or a peasant revolt. It's his own family, his brothers, his uncles, his cousins, and, most terrifyingly, his own sons. Every male member of the Ottoman dynasty is a potential replacement. And in a system of absolute monarchy, there's no room for a vice-sultan. There is only one spot at the top, and ambitious men with daggers usually form the line to get it. This is why your son, your beautiful baby boy, is a threat from the moment he draws his first breath. He is a rival to his own father, to his half-brothers, and to any other male relative who fancies a turn on the throne. The Sultan's day is a crushing routine of ritual and responsibility. He wakes before dawn for prayer, then holds the divan, the imperial council, where he listens, often from behind a lattice screen so no one can read his expression, as his viziers debate matters of state. He receives ambassadors, reviews military reports, and signs death warrants. It's an endless stream of high-stakes decisions. Is this governor plotting a rebellion? Should we go to war with Venice? Did the Grand Vizier make a treasonous-sounding pun? His mind must be a fortress, constantly analyzing threats. He can't show weakness. He can't appear indecisive. And he can't completely trust anyone. Not his viziers, who might be plotting to replace him. Not his generals, who might turn the army against him. Not even you. He might love you, but he knows you are ambitious for your son. He knows that your loyalty is ultimately to your child, not to him. This brings us to a wonderfully strange and fringe tidbit. The Sultan's public appearances were often elaborate, silent, and designed to inspire awe and fear. When he went to the mosque on Fridays, the procession was a massive spectacle. But the Sultan himself was often completely silent and still, his face an impassive mask. It was a calculated performance of divine detachment. He wasn't a mere mortal man going to pray. He was a living icon, a conduit of God's power. An even weirder detail. In some periods, it was forbidden to look directly at the Sultan's face. You were supposed to gaze at the ground as he passed. This level of theatrical reverence wasn't just about ego. It was a security measure. It's hard to stab a guy when you're not allowed to make eye contact. You watch him play with your son, and for a moment you see a glimpse of a normal father. He smiles, he tickles the baby's feet, and his face softens. But then the moment passes. The mask slips back on. He looks at his own child, And you know he's not just seeing a baby. He's seeing a future. A future that could be glorious or could be a bloody civil war. He's running the calculations. He's weighing the odds. It's a terrible burden that makes men paranoid. Sultan Murad IV, for example, was famously suspicious. He would prowl the streets of Constantinople in disguise at night, personally enforcing his own laws, like a ban on coffee and tobacco, and executing people on the spot. It was a brutal form of micromanagement born of deep-seated paranoia. He trusted no one, so he did everything himself. Another sultan, Ibrahim I, who grew up in confinement, was so mentally unstable that he allegedly had his entire harem of nearly 300 women drowned because he heard a rumor that one of them had been compromised. While that story is likely an exaggeration, the fact that it was believable tells you everything you need to know about the psychological pressures of the job. Historians still argue about the true nature of the sultan's power. Was he an absolute autocrat, a despot whose every whim was law? Or was he actually a prisoner of the palace system, constrained by tradition, religious law, and the powerful factions at court like the Janissaries or the Vizierate? Was he the master of the machine, or just its most high-profile cog? The answer probably shifted from sultan to sultan. A strong, ruthless sultan like Mem II could bend the empire to his will. A weak or unstable one like Ibrahim could be a puppet, manipulated by his mother, his viziers, or the Chief Black Eunuch. You realize that your son's survival depends on this one man's sanity and strength. As long as his father is strong and secure on the throne, your son is relatively safe. But the moment the sultan shows weakness, the moment his health fails, the moment a rival faction grows too bold, the knives come out. And the first targets will be the other potential heirs. Your sweet baby boy is now a player in the game, whether you like it or not. And his first opponents are his own brothers, who are, at this very moment, growing up in their own nurseries, being looked after by their own ambitious mothers. The sibling rivalry is about to begin, and it's the deadliest edition imaginable. Your son is no longer a baby. He's a boy, then a young man. He has his father's eyes and your ambition. You've spent every waking moment of his life protecting him, educating him, and whispering in his ear that he is destined for greatness. You've navigated the snake pit of the harem, forming alliances with eunuchs, cultivating spies among your rival servants, and making yourself indispensable to the Valide Sultan, who is now your mother-in-law and either your greatest ally or your most dangerous foe. But now your son is coming of age, and he's about to leave the nest. And the nest, it turns out, was the safest place for him. In the earlier centuries of the empire, we're talking from the 14th to the late 16th century, the system for managing all these ambitious princes was, in theory, a brilliant and practical one. This is the key historical fact of the era. When a prince, a Seytsad, reached a certain age, usually his early teens, he would be sent out from the capital to govern a province. It was like the world's most high-stakes study abroad program. He wasn't sent alone, of course. He was accompanied by a vast entourage, including his mother. This was your big move. You would consolidate your power base in the harem and transfer it to a provincial capital such as Manisa or Amasya. Your son is now a governor. He has his own palace, his own court, his own mini-army. He's learning how to rule. He presides over council meetings, leads local military campaigns, and knows the nuts and bolts of administration. And you are right there with him, his chief advisor, his staunchest supporter, and the head of his household. You manage his finances, you vet his appointments, and you keep the lines of communication open with your allies back in Constantinople. You are a queen in your own provincial kingdom. It's a heady, powerful existence after years of being confined to the harem. But this isn't just about education. It's about building a power base. Your son is now in direct, open competition with his brothers, who are all doing the same thing in their own provinces. It's a race. Who can prove himself the more competent ruler? Who can win the loyalty of the local troops and notables? Who can build the most enormous war chest? The provinces closest to the capital were considered the most prestigious appointments, because when the old sultan finally kicked the bucket, the throne would go to whichever son could get back to Constantinople first and secure the treasury and the loyalty of the Janissaries. Proximity was everything. It was a mad, cross-country dash for the crown. This system had a clear, if brutal, logic. It ensured that the next sultan would be a man with experience in governing and warfare. It was survival of the fittest. The weak, the incompetent, the unlucky, they would be weeded out. The prince who made it to the throne would be, in theory, the most capable of all his brothers. It's why the early Ottoman Empire produced a string of brilliant, formidable rulers. They had all survived this brutal apprenticeship. Now for the quirky and slightly absurd fringe tidbit. The mothers, the Cadens like you, were intense rivals by proxy. The letters flying between the provincial courts and the capital were a flurry of espionage, propaganda, and straight-up trash talk. You'd be writing to your allies at court, talking up your son's every minor achievement. Said Mustafa successfully dedicated a new fountain today. The people love him. He is truly a font of wisdom, while simultaneously spreading rumors about your rivals. I hear Said Bayezid's province is on the brink of famine. So sad. Also, his beard is weird. The mothers were the campaign managers in this brutal political race, and they were utterly ruthless. Their son's victory was their own, and his defeat meant their ruin. Of course, this whole system had one massive, glaring, bloody flaw. What happens when the old sultan dies? Civil war. Almost inevitably. The moment the news breaks, you and your son know what you have to do. You gather your troops, you grab your war chest, and you race for the capital. And your son's brothers are doing the same thing. The empire would be plunged into a devastating internal conflict as the princes fought for power. It was incredibly destructive, tearing the empire apart for months or even years. The winner would take the throne. The losers and all of their male children would be executed. No exceptions. It was all or nothing. Historians still argue about whether this system of provincial governorships and subsequent civil war was a brilliant, if harsh, meritocratic filter that produced strong leaders, or a reckless, destabilizing practice that periodically crippled the empire. Was the bloodshed a necessary price to pay for strong leadership, or was it a fundamental bug in the system's code? When you're the mother of one of the princes, watching your son ride off to fight his own brother, you probably don't care about the academic debate. You know that only one of them is coming back alive. You stand on the walls of your provincial palace, watching your son's army disappear over the horizon. You've poured your entire life into this boy. You've schemed, you've plotted, you've prayed. And it all comes down to this, a roll of the dice on a battlefield hundreds of miles away. You wait. The waiting is the worst part, days, then weeks with no news. Every messenger who arrives could be bringing news of victory and a golden crown, or news of defeat and a silk bowstring for your son, and a one-way trip to a miserable retirement for you. This system, the bloody, chaotic race to the throne, was deemed too costly, too destructive, and so, in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, it was replaced by something new. Something that was supposed to be more stable, more humane. Something that turned out to be a hell of a different kind altogether. Instead of sending the princes out, they decided to keep them in. They decided to lock them up. Welcome to the Kafes. The golden cage. The civil wars were just too messy, too expensive. Every time a sultan died, the empire had to endure a bloody family feud that left fields burned, treasuries empty, and thousands dead. It was a terrible business model. So, around the beginning of the 17th century, a new, more civilized solution was implemented. Instead of sending the princes out to govern provinces and build armies, they would keep them safely at home, locked up, in a luxurious prison apartment inside Topkapı Palace itself. This new institution was called the Kafes, which literally means the cage, and it was one of the most psychologically brutal innovations in the history of monarchy. Imagine this. You are a prince. One day, your older brother ascends the throne. The next day, you are taken from your rooms, separated from most of your friends and tutors, and escorted to a set of opulent but sealed apartments within the harem complex. You have everything you could want. You have silks, jewels, the finest food, a library, and a handful of specially chosen, sterile concubines who can provide companionship but never, ever a child. You have a beautiful private garden to walk in. You have servants who bow to your every command. The only thing you don't have is the key. The doors are locked. The windows are barred with heavy iron grills. You are a prisoner for life. or until your brother dies and it's your turn to rule, whichever comes first. This is the mainstream historical fact of the Kafes. It became the standard way the Ottomans dealt with surplus princes for over 300 years. From the early 1600s onwards, potential heirs to the throne were no longer executed upon their brother's accession. Instead, they were kept in gilded confinement, sometimes for decades. The goal was to prevent them from becoming figureheads for rebellions. A prince locked away in the palace couldn't raise an army. He couldn't challenge his brother. He was neutralized. It was seen as a humane alternative to fratricide. For you, the mother, this is a new kind of hell. Your son isn't dead, but he's not alive either. He's in limbo. You might be able to visit him, but those visits are monitored. Your time together is limited. You see the light go out of his eyes. The ambitious, energetic boy you raised is gone. In his place is a man with nothing to do. His days are a monotonous cycle of waking, eating, reading, pacing, and sleeping. He has no purpose, no responsibilities, no future except the dim, unlikely possibility that he might one day be called out of this cage to rule an empire he hasn't seen in 30 years. The psychological toll was immense. Some princes went mad, utterly, catastrophically insane. Imagine being surrounded by luxury but stripped of all meaning. You'd talk to yourself. You'd develop strange obsessions. You'd become crippled by paranoia, convinced that every meal was poisoned, every servant a spy sent by your brother to watch you. You live in constant low-grade terror, because while the official policy was no longer executed, a nervous sultan could always change his mind. A whisper of a plot, a rumor of discontent, and the guards could show up at your door one night with that dreaded silk bowstring. You are safe, but only as long as you are forgotten. This brings us to a really bizarre and sad fringe tidbit. Some princes, to cope with the crushing boredom, developed elaborate and obsessive hobbies. One prince, for example, became a master calligrapher, spending decades perfecting a single style of script. Another became obsessed with clockmaking, taking apart and reassembling complex European timepieces. A man with infinite time on his hands, literally trying to master it. But the saddest cases were the ones who just broke. They would spend their days compulsively tracing the patterns on the tiles or counting the leaves on the trees in their garden, their minds retreating into a tiny, repetitive world they could control. They were ghosts haunting their own lavish mausoleums. This system created a new kind of ruler. When a sultan who had been raised in the old way, governing provinces, fighting wars, died, he might be succeeded by his brother who had just spent 40 years locked in the caves. This man would emerge, blinking, into the sunlight, to be placed on the throne of a massive, complex empire. He had zero experience. He didn't know how to lead an army. He didn't know how to run a council meeting. He didn't know any of his own ministers. He barely knew what the world outside his cage looked like. He was often socially inept, psychologically damaged, and utterly unprepared for the burden of rule. Historians still argue about the true legacy of the Kafes. Did it successfully stabilize the succession and prevent civil wars? Yes, for the most part. But did it also lead to the decline of the quality of the sultans themselves, replacing experienced warrior statesmen with paranoid, incompetent neurotics? Also, yes, it solved one problem by creating a dozen new ones. It was a lazy, short-sighted solution that traded acute, bloody crises for a slow, creeping decay at the very top of the system. The sultans of the 17th and 18th centuries were, with a few exceptions, a far cry from the formidable figures of the empire's golden age. They were products of their gilded prison. You watch your son waste away. You see the vacant look in his eyes. He is safe from the bowstring, but his soul is being strangled, slowly, day by day. And you realize, with a dawning horror, that this humane solution might be crueler than the alternative. The old way was a quick, bloody death. This is a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow erasure of a man's spirit. And you ask yourself, which is worse? A clean death on the battlefield, fighting for a crown? Or a long, empty life in a beautiful cage? This system was born from a desire to escape the bloody logic of the past. a past codified into law by one of the empire's greatest and most ruthless sultans. A law that made killing your brother not just a good idea, but a patriotic duty. The infamous law of fratricide. So, how did this whole bloody mess get started? Why was an empire so obsessed with brothers killing brothers? To understand that, you have to rewind. Go back to the 15th century, before the Kafes, before the high-stakes provincial governorships became standard practice. You have to meet the man who looked at the chaos of succession and decided the best solution was a bigger, more efficient pile of bodies. Meet Sultan Mehmed II. You probably know him as Mehmed the Conqueror. He's the guy who, at the age of 21, conquered Constantinople, ending the Byzantine Empire and turning the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. He was brilliant, ruthless, and a visionary. He was also deeply pragmatic about the ugly business of holding on to power. After conquering the city and establishing it as his new capital, Mehmed looked at the history of his own family. He saw a recurring pattern of uncles fighting nephews and brothers fighting brothers, plunging the state into civil war every time a sultan died. He himself had to fight off at least one rival relative to secure his own throne. He saw this internal strife as the single greatest threat to the stability and expansion of his new empire. A state at war with itself cannot conquer its neighbors. So he decided to fix it. His solution was simple, elegant, and breathtakingly brutal. He made fratricide the law. This is the central, horrifying historical fact. Mehmed the Conqueror codified the practice of royal fratricide in his legal code, his canoname. The infamous article states, and I'm paraphrasing here for modern ears, "For the good of the state, whichever of my sons shall attain the sultanate, it is acceptable for him to kill his brothers." Most of the ulama, the senior religious scholars, have given their permission for this. Let that sink in. It wasn't just a grim necessity or a dirty secret. It was written down. It was official policy. The new sultan had not only the right but arguably the duty to eliminate his male siblings to prevent a future civil war. It was framed as a sacrifice for the Nizam-i-Alam, the world order. You kill your two brothers now to prevent a war that could kill 20,000 people later. It's a terrifying kind of utilitarian math. This law fundamentally changed the game. Before Mehmed, a new sultan might try to imprison, blind, or exile his brothers. It was messy and often ineffective. A blinded prince could still be a figurehead for a rebellion. An exiled prince could come back with a foreign army. Mehmed's law made the solution clean, permanent, and final. The moment a new sultan was proclaimed, the first order of business, before the celebrations even got started, was to send the executioners. And who were these executioners? Not just any goon with an X. The sultan's elite deaf-mute corps carried out the executions. This is a genuinely bizarre and chilling fringe tidbit of the Ottoman court. For centuries, the sultans employed a group of deaf-mutes as palace servants, guards, and, most importantly, as secret assassins. Why? Because they could be trusted with the most sensitive secrets. They could not overhear and repeat conversations. They could not be interrogated. They communicated in their own unique sign language. And when they came for you, there were no pleas for mercy, no last words, no screams, just a silent, terrifying efficiency. The method of execution for a royal was also specific. Strangulation with a silk bowstring. Why? Because spilling royal blood was considered taboo. This way, the prince could be dispatched without a single drop of blood being shed. It was a neat, tidy, and utterly gruesome loophole. Imagine the scene. A new sultan is on the throne. Deep within the palace, his younger brothers, some of them just children, are playing in their rooms. The doors open, and a group of silent, imposing men enter. The children might even think it's a game at first. There is no sound, no warning, just the swift, final embrace of the silk cord. It is the stuff of nightmares, and it was state policy. The most famous and brutal application of this law came a little over a century after Mehmed, when Sultan Mehmed III came to the throne in 1595. He had 19 brothers and half-brothers. He had all 19 of them, some of them infants, strangled in a single day. The caskets of the 19 murdered princes being carried out of the palace were a public spectacle of such horror that it is said to have deeply traumatized the populace of Constantinople and may have been the catalyst for finding a better way, which ultimately led to the Kafes. Historians still argue about the precise legal and religious justification for this law. How did the Islamic scholars, the ulama, sign off on something that seems to violate the Quranic prohibition against murder so clearly? The debate is complex, but it boils down to the concept of necessity. The scholars reasoned that the chaos and bloodshed of a civil war were a greater evil than the preventative murder of a few individuals. They essentially issued a religious waiver, arguing that ensuring the stability of the Islamic State and preventing fitna, sedition, chaos, trumped the individual's right to life. It's a chilling piece of legal and theological gymnastics, where the definition of murder becomes uncomfortably flexible when state security is on the line. This law is the dark heart of the Ottoman succession system. It's the reason you, as the mother of a prince, were so terrified. It's the reason you schemed and plotted to get your son into the best provincial governorship. It's the reason the race to the capital upon the Sultan's death was so desperate. The stakes weren't just power and glory. The stakes were life and death. The winner got the world. The loser, and all his sons, got the silk bowstring, delivered by silent men who couldn't hear them beg. Faced with that reality, the Kafes, a lifetime of solitary confinement in a luxury prison, starts to look, well, not good but different. It was an attempt to break this cycle of blood. But in doing so, it created a new kind of chaos, a new kind of rot that would eat away at the empire from the inside out. So you have this new system, the Kafes, the cage. No more automatic civil wars. No more state-mandated 19-brother murder sprees. Problem solved, right? The empire should now be a haven of stability and smooth power transitions. Oh, you sweet, naive summer child. The Kafes didn't solve the problem. It just changed the nature of the disaster. Instead of periodic, acute bouts of bloody chaos, the empire now had to deal with a chronic, creeping dysfunctionality at the very top. This is the case study of how a humane solution backfired in the most spectacular and bizarre ways. Let's take Sultan Ibrahim I, who reigned in the mid-17th century. This man is the poster child for everything wrong with the Kafe system. He spent 22 years, from the age of 2 until he was 24, locked away in the cage. His entire childhood and young adulthood were spent in a single set of rooms, under the constant terror that his older brother, the formidable and ruthless Murad IV, would have him executed. Murad executed several of their other brothers and, according to some accounts, was on the verge of killing Ibrahim II when their mother, the powerful Kozum Sultan, intervened. So, when Murad IV died, and the palace officials came to the Kafes to tell Ibrahim he was the new sultan, he didn't believe them. He was so terrified that he barricaded the door, convinced it was a trick and that they were the silent executioners come to finish the job. This is a mainstream historical fact. They had to bring him his dead brother's corpse and physically show it to him to convince him that he was safe, and that he was now the ruler of the empire. This is the man who was now in charge. A man so traumatized by decades of confinement and fear that his first act as sultan was to hide. And it didn't get better. Ibrahim was eccentric, to put it mildly. He was utterly unprepared to rule. He had no experience, no knowledge of the world, and a psyche that had been put through a blender. He spent his time on frivolous pursuits, leaving the actual running of the empire to his mother and the Grand Vizier. But his personal tastes were where things went from tragic to truly deeply weird. This leads us to the quirky and infamous tidbit about him: his obsession with ambergris and fur. Ibrahim developed a fixation on large women, sending his agents across the empire to find the most corpulent woman they could. He also became obsessed with sable fur, demanding that the palace be decorated with it. He lined walls with sable, had carpets of sable made, and insisted his concubines were nothing but sable. The expense was so astronomical that it nearly bankrupted the treasury. He was, in essence, a man-child with absolute power and a list of increasingly bizarre and expensive hobbies. He was trying to fill the psychological void left by 22 years of sensory deprivation with tactile excess. He was the product of a broken system, and he, in turn, was breaking the empire. His reign was a disaster. The government was paralyzed by corruption and its erratic whims. Eventually, the major officials and the janissaries had had enough. They deposed him, sent him back to the Kafes, which must have been the ultimate psychological whiplash. And 10 days later, with the permission of the new Valide Sultan, the mother of his young successor, they had him strangled. The system designed to prevent the killing of princes had just resulted in the killing of a sultan. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a ceremonial dagger. Ibrahim's story is the most extreme, but it's not unique. The Kafes consistently produced sultans who were, at best, mediocre and, at worst, dangerously unstable. The experience of long-term confinement, sensory deprivation, and constant fear was not exactly a recipe for a well-adjusted, competent leader. It replaced one kind of risk, civil war, with another, the risk of being ruled by a madman. Historians still argue about the precise moment the Kafe system began to cause irreversible damage to the Ottoman state. Was it immediately with the first generation of caged princes? Or was it a slower burn, a gradual decline in the caliber of leadership over many decades? Some argue that the empire was already facing other serious challenges, economic, military, etc., and that the weak sultans were a symptom of a larger decline, not its primary cause. Others maintain that placing psychologically damaged and incompetent men on the throne was like pouring gasoline on a fire, accelerating the empire's problems exponentially. It's the classic chicken and egg debate of historical decline. Did weak leaders cause the decline, or did the decline produce weak leaders? As the mother of a prince in this new era, your ambition has to take a strange, ghoulish turn. You no longer hope that your son will be a great warrior. You hope he survives his time in the cage with some small fragment of his sanity intact. You pray that his ruling brother dies of natural causes, and that your son is chosen next. You find yourself in the perverse position of rooting for a man to die so your son can be freed from a living death. And if he does emerge, your job becomes even harder. You, as the new Valide Sultan, along with the Grand Vizier, now have to essentially rule the empire yourselves, all while trying to manage the traumatized, unpredictable man-child who is now officially in charge. You have to prop him up, guide his hand, and clean up his messes, all while praying he doesn't decide one day that sable fur is out and decorating the palace with the heads of his advisors is in. You finally won the game, but the prize is a nightmare. You did it. You absolute monster, you actually did it. After decades of scheming, surviving, and waiting, the impossible has happened. The reigning sultan, your son's brother, has died. Maybe it was a hunting accident. Perhaps it was a sudden fever. Perhaps it was a well-placed, untraceable poison that you'll never, ever speak of. And now, the officials have gone to the Kafes, dragged your blinking, bewildered son out into the sunlight, and placed the sword of Osman in his hand. He is the sultan, and you are the Valide Sultan, the Queen Mother, the CEO. You have reached the top of the blood-soaked, tear-stained corporate ladder. Your moment of triumph feels hollow. You walk into the Valide Sultan's chambers, the same ones you entered as a terrified novice all those years ago, and they are now yours. The silks are yours. The jewels are yours. The terrifying authority is yours. The servants who bow to you are the daughters and granddaughters of the women you competed against. You are the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire, possibly the most powerful woman in the world. Your son, the Sultan, is a stranger to you, a man warped by decades of solitude. His spirit is threadbare as an old carpet. He looks to you for everything. He is a puppet, and you are the master puppeteer. You've won. This is the historical reality for the Valide Sultans of the 17th century, the era often called the Sultanate of Women. Because the Kafes produced such weak and incompetent male rulers, the real power usually lay with their mothers. Women like Kozum Sultan and her daughter-in-law Turhan Sultan were not just influential. They were the de facto rulers of the empire for long stretches of time. They attended council meetings from behind a screen, appointed and dismissed grand viziers, dictated foreign policy, and controlled the state treasury. They had reached the pinnacle of power, wielding more authority than any woman in the Western world could have dreamed of at the time. Your days are a blur of power. You wake to find ambassadors from Venice and France waiting for an audience. You dictate letters to generals on the Hungarian frontier. You manage the vast network of charities and building projects, mosques, hospitals, soup kitchens, that serve as both genuine piety and a massive PR campaign for the dynasty. You are a stateswoman, a CEO, and a spymaster all in one. You have more money than you can count, a personal income that rivals that of European kings. You are, by every conceivable measure, a success. But at night, the silence of your opulent chambers is deafening. You are haunted. You are the survivor of a brutal game, and survivor's guilt is a bitter ghost. You think of the girls you arrived with on that stinking ship, the ones who didn't make it. The one who died of a fever in the dormitory. The one who was beaten for spilling a drink. The one who disappeared. You think of your rivals, the other Cadens, the mothers of the other princes. The ones whose sons were strangled so that yours could live. Or the ones whose sons are now locked away in the Kafes. Just as yours once was, their mothers now relegated to a life of powerless obscurity. You see their faces in your dreams. And then there's the fringe tidbit, a sad, private reality of your public triumph. You are a grandmother now. Your son, the Sultan, has his own harem, his own favorites, his own children. And you see the cycle beginning all over again. You see the ambitious young women, their eyes full of the same fire you once had. You see them give birth to sons, your grandsons, and you feel a cold dread creep into your heart. Because these beautiful baby boys are not just your grandchildren. They are rivals. They are threats to each other. You look at them, and you can't help but see the ghosts of the future. The silk bowstring, the silent executioners, the grim procession of tiny caskets. You are the matriarch of a family that is genetically programmed to devour itself. You tried to save your son, but what about your other sons? Most women in your position had more than one. What happened to them? If you were lucky, you only had one son, the one who made it to the throne. But what if you had two, or three? The moment your eldest becomes sultan, your younger boys are immediately taken to the Kafes. You are the Valide Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire, but you are powerless to stop it. You have sacrificed your other children for the sake of one. You can visit them in their gilded prison. You can send them gifts, but you cannot free them. You look into the eyes of your younger son, and you see a reflection of the broken man who now sits on the throne. You know the life you condemned him to. Historians still argue about the legacy of these powerful Valide sultans. Were they selfless regents, holding a crumbling empire together in the face of incompetent male rule? Or were they just as corrupt and self-serving as the men they replaced, more interested in perpetuating their own power and enriching their families than in the good of the state? Were they feminist icons ahead of their time, or just another brand of despot? The answer is, as always, a messy and uncomfortable yes to all of the above. They were brilliant, ruthless, pious, greedy, loving, and cruel. They were survivors, and survival in that world required a moral flexibility that is terrifying to behold. You stand on your balcony, overlooking the Bosphorus. The lights of the city glitter below. You have everything a person could ever want: wealth, power, influence. But you are utterly alone, the queen of a kingdom of ghosts. The ghosts of the rivals you defeated, the ghosts of the children you couldn't save, and the ghost of the young girl you once were, before the world taught you that love is a liability and survival is the only virtue. You have won the Game of Thrones. But as you look out at the dark water, you have to wonder if the prize was worth the cost. And you think of the thousands of other women, the ones who didn't win, the ones who were forgotten, the ones who were sent to the old palace to fade into nothing. You won. But what about the losers? For every one woman who became a Valide Sultan, for every handful who became a powerful Caden, thousands didn't. What happened to the girl who was your best friend in the dormitory? The one who taught you a few words of her language, who shared her bread with you? What happened to the Iqbal who was the Sultan's favorite for a month, before he got bored and moved on to someone new? What happened to the mothers of the princes who lost the succession war, or the mothers of daughters, or the women who never caught the Sultan's eye at all? They didn't just vanish. They were sent to a place that was, in some ways, worse than the Kafes. They were sent to the Old Palace. The Old Palace, or Eski Saray, was located in the center of the city, on the site of the original palace built by Mehmed the Conqueror before Topkapi was completed. After the court moved to the grand new seaside complex, the Old Palace was repurposed. It became the harem's official retirement home, its dumping ground, its island of misfit toys. This is the final, sad historical fact of the harem life cycle. When a sultan died, his entire harem, all of his concubines, favorites, and childless consorts, were unceremoniously packed up and shipped off to the Old Palace to live out the rest of their days. Their apartments at Topkapi were immediately cleared out to make way for the new sultan's incoming harem. It was a brutal, efficient changing of the guard. You, as the mother of the new sultan, are one of the very few who get to stay. You get to watch this sad exodus. You see women you've known for decades, women who were once your rivals, your friends, your tormentors, stripped of their finery, their jewels inventoried and returned to the treasury. They are reduced back to simple linen shifts, their retinues of servants dismissed. They are loaded into covered wagons, their faces veiled, and carted through the city to their new home. It's a walk of shame, a public demotion. They have gone from being the consorts of the most powerful man in the world to being has-beens, yesterday's news. Life in the Old Palace was a purgatory of boredom and obscurity. It was a vast, sprawling complex, but often neglected and in disrepair. The stipends the women received were a fraction of what they had enjoyed at Topkapi. The food was plain, the days were long and empty. They were still, technically, members of the royal household, but in exile. They were ghosts. Their entire world had revolved around the son of the sultan, and now that son was gone. They were left in a cold, dim twilight. They had no purpose. They could never leave. They could never remarry. They were there to wait for death. The saddest cases were the mothers of deposed or executed princes. Imagine being the mother of a brilliant, promising Saitsad who lost the race to the throne. You watched your son and all his children be executed. Now you are sent to the Old Palace, where you have to live side by side with the other failed mothers, all of you drowning in your shared grief and resentment. The atmosphere must have been toxic, a soup of sorrow, bitterness, and regret. You'd spend your days replaying every mistake, every missed opportunity, every moment that could have changed your fate. It was a psychological torment chamber. And here is the final, quirky, and deeply depressing fringe tidbit of our story. Sometimes a woman could get called back. If a new sultan came to the throne who was the son of a woman already exiled to the Old Palace, perhaps because his father died and he was the next in line, she would be brought out of her dusty retirement and suddenly elevated to the glorious position of Valide Sultan. This was known as the journey from the Old Palace to the New Palace. And it was a Cinderella story of the most bizarre kind. Imagine spending 20 years in obscurity, living on a meager pension and eating stale bread. Then one day, a procession of high officials shows up, bows to the ground, and tells you that you are now the most powerful woman in the empire. The whiplash would be enough to give you a brain hemorrhage. It happened, but it was rare. For most, the trip to the Old Palace was a one-way ticket to oblivion. Historians still argue about the function of the Old Palace. Was it a compassionate, if melancholy, system for caring for the women of the previous regime? Or was it a cruel and politically motivated institution designed to neutralize any lingering influence they might have? Was it a retirement home or a prison? Like everything in the harem, it was both. It kept the women safe and provided for, but it also stripped them of their power, their identity, and their hope. It was a slow, quiet erasure. You stand on your balcony in Topkapi, the new Valide Sultan, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, in a crumbling old palace, are the women you left behind. You think of them, sitting in their dimly lit rooms, embroidering handkerchiefs for no one, singing songs no one will hear, telling stories of a life that is already fading into legend. They are the footnotes of history, the supporting cast in someone else's drama. For every woman who won, 1,000 were sent to the Old Palace. For every name we remember, like Kozum or Roxalana, there are tens of thousands of names that have been completely forgotten, lost to time like tears in the Bosphorus. You have escaped their fate. You have climbed the mountain of skulls and now stand at its peak. It is a lonely, cold, and terrifying view. You have made it. You survived the unboxing, the backstabbing, the lethal curriculum, and the psychological horror of the Kafes. You've seen the dizzying heights of power and the dusty, forgotten corners of the old palace. The journey from a terrified slave girl on a stinking ship to the all-powerful Valide Sultan, or more likely, to a forgotten ghost in a retirement home for royal concubines, was the most brutal career path in the world. It was a system built on a foundation of paradoxes. A cage made of gold, a school where failure was fatal, and a family whose primary tradition was murder. The infamous law of fratricide and its humane successor, the Kafes, were two sides of the same terrible coin, desperate, brutal attempts to solve the fundamental problem of absolute power, that there can only be one. In trying to secure the world order, the Ottomans created a private world of exquisite suffering, a machine that consumed thousands of lives, both male and female, to keep the throne stable. The harem was not a fantasy. It was a prison, a university, a political arena, and a fortress all at once. It was a place where women could be rendered completely powerless or rise to become the secret rulers of an empire. For the few who succeeded, the price was a piece of their soul. For the many who failed, the price was everything. As you close your eyes tonight, just remember, your life might be complicated, your job might be annoying, and your family might be weird, but at least nobody is expecting you to murder your brother for the good of the state. Probably. And at least you don't have to worry that the new intern is secretly plotting to have you sewn into a sack and thrown into the sea. Probably. Sweet dreams.